I think I was armed, but I don't think I shot him, though. The immediate thing is to occupy the strongest victim, in this case, male.
Did you have her with you then? Did you take her out of the truck?
I took her someplace where it was no traffic or no people.
The victim in that case was a white female. And how was it you saw this girl?
They was stuck in the snow.
All right, you agreed to take this girl home.
Yes. But I had to get away from Main Street in order to do anything forcefully. Earlier that night, we had followed this white car. Whoever was hesitant to let down the window because I had to hit on the window with the butt of the gun. I put both of the people in the trunk and I drove. So I took them up underneath the railroad track bridge and we started to take those victims. I think changed my mind.
Tell me what happens next. Tell us what happens next.
Welcome in to this 11 Investigates presentation. I'm Melissa Andrews. We're here to talk about a serial killer, a Toledo man and his brother. One is free, the other is now eligible for parole. I'm joined by lead investigator Brian Duggar. And Brian, you've been following this case, and now we're going to dive into some of the confessions from Anthony Cook, who is up for parole. And first, this is what really paved the way for his brother Nathaniel to be freed 6 years ago, which still doesn't sit well with some people.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't make sense to a lot of people. How can a serial killer actually get out? And so what happened back in 1998, 99, something like that, they had identified that Nathaniel Cook was also involved with Anthony Cook. And the deal was, look, you tell us everything that you guys did in Lucas County, and Nathaniel can get out after 20 years. So the confession tapes that we're actually going to listen to today, this was in April of 2000, and the deal was, you tell us all of this, Nathaniel will be out in 20 years. And these are tapes that no one's ever seen before.
So this serial killer certainly loved his brother enough, but he wasn't facing any more time back then for confessing to these additional murders, Anthony.
Yeah, he really wasn't. I mean, he was originally convicted back in 1982 or 83 of killing Peter Sawicki. So he got 15 years to life in that. I think when they made this confession, it was actually to the first killing that they did together back in the early 1980s. He actually did plead guilty to that. So that's why he was even in prison at this point, he's been in prison for 40 years, and that's why, because of the second murder conviction. Mm-hmm. But he was never convicted of any of the other ones.
Right, so these confession tapes that we're about to show you portions of is really so that Nathaniel could get out, which he has. It was not an easy decision here in our newsroom and on our investigative team and with our managers to decide to air these tapes. So talk about what went into this decision to show portions of these tapes today.
Yeah, like I said, these tapes have never been seen before, and the prosecutor's office didn't want them to ever be seen before. So there were multiple media outlets back in the day that wanted to show these, and I believe I got them from the police department back in 2020. We just never did anything with them because you don't want the victims' families to, you don't want to harm them. They don't want. So what we intentionally did with this, we're not showing any of the graphic details where he talks about killing anybody, but what we want to show is the actual mindset that went into these different killings, and why, when you think about this guy being out on parole, possibly by the beginning of next year's hearings this week, December 5th, we want to show that, look, this guy is very calculated, cold. He thought these through. This wasn't because he was angry and he just spontaneously killed somebody. He had a plan.
And several of the families, you reached out to them. Are they okay with this?
Yeah, I reached out to as many of the family members as I could make contact with, and they were not only okay with it, but they all wanted me to air this because they're like, we want people to know, you know, what a beast he really is, or what a devil he is, and, you know, in their words, and they think that this will actually help that cause.
So the Cook brothers, we already discussed in previous videos, which you can find here on WTOL 11+, they targeted white people because of some perceived mistreatment at one point behind bars by white prison guards. But in these tapes, you can see Nathaniel discusses crimes committed against just women and then crimes committed against white couples.
Right.
White women
Anthony
and white
does.
couples.
Yep.
Anthony. Okay, so we're going to start in the order that he was questioned about these killings, right?
Right, and they are not in the order the actual killings happened. It just, the order that on the tapes, when they brought this up, they said the first one we're going to talk about is this case, and the first case is the very first one that happened back in 1973. Vicky Small, this was Anthony Cook, along with somebody else who's never been identified, but he was with somebody else, and that we believe this is the first killing that Anthony Cook did back in 1973.
I talked to her first to keep her calm. Then, I don't know exactly where I took her back then, but I had to get away from a main street in order to do anything forcefully to her. And I had, I think I banished a gun and blindfolded her.
Do you remember what you blindfolded her with?
No,
Okay.
I don't know if it was something she had or something I had.
Where had you had your gun? Where do you brandish it from? Where do you take it out of?
Well, something that small parts, pocket.
Pocket. You think you had it in your pocket?
Jacket pocket, coat pocket, something like
All right.
So what do you take away from that explanation about how he took Vicky Small?
Yeah, well, first, what's really interesting to me about this is people say, well, the real killing spree started back in 1980. This was 1973. Well, why didn't he kill people in those 7 years? He was in prison. He was in prison, and right up until this point in 1973, he had just gotten out of prison for armed robbery at that point. And you mentioned the white guards. During that early 1970s, he said that's when he was abused by the white guards. And almost immediately after he got out of prison, this killing happens. And then there's this pause while he goes back to prison for another armed robbery. But what I take out of it is that, yes, I mean, he just happened upon this woman who was stuck in the snow, and you would think he's like, well, maybe he just wanted to help her get out of the snow, but no, he had a plan. She was stuck in the snow, she was helpless, and, you know, he was able to coax her into the car. So, I mean, he's very much crime of opportunity, because she was easy victim, because she was there, helpless, stranded, and that's what he would look for. He would look for these victims who are helpless, kind of isolated. Yeah, so that's what I took out of it.
And she was the one found in Ottawa Park.
She was.
Okay.
Yep.
Now we start to see that this goes into couples, which I've told you multiple times. It reminds me of Zodiac, who went after these couples who were in cars. And I asked you too, is it a very common thing back in that time to sit in your car with your significant other? But apparently, I mean, it was many serial killers, several serial killers, I guess you could say, victimized couples around the country who were sitting in their cars.
Yeah, and they weren't, I mean, he was not the only serial killer even going around Toledo at that time. I mean, we know of at least 3 that were there, but I mean, him and his brother, they were clearly, for the most part, targeting couples. And as we're going to see in several of these sound bites, I mean, it's couples sitting in their cars. It happened over and over.
So set this one up for us. Who is the couple here that we're talking about? When did this happen?
Yeah, so this was Stacy Blahnik and Daryl Cole, and they were sitting out in the street in a car. And this one, Anthony actually did by himself. So this was, again, like I said, we're not going in order of the killings. The first 3 killings were with his brother Nathaniel. Those were in the early 1980s. I believe this one was in 1981. So Anthony spots them. He sees them sitting in their car. After dark, he approaches the car. And I think what's interesting about this, he said, I had a game plan when I was approaching this car. You know, I would sometimes go up to people and ask for directions. And I knew that if they were sitting in a neighborhood, I would pick a spot in that neighborhood because they'd be more likely to interact with me. And that's what you see happens here.
They was parked, so I assumed that they lived in the immediate vicinity because it was like a side street and no store or nothing like that around. So I went up to the car and might have used the ploy like for an address to get window accessibility. If you give a person an address in the immediate area or a street that's real close, then they might think you're just a block or so away and more accessible to helping you because they know exactly where that is.
And he ended up killing Stacy and Daryl with baseball bat that was in the trunk.
That's right. Yeah, which was, you would see elsewhere in these interviews, is he said he would try to use a different mode of killing every time because he didn't want the police to catch on that he was just using a gun or he was using a knife or something like that. So he would, again, it goes to his thought process that he's trying to get away with this, and he's trying to do it as often as he can, but he's thinking, how am I going to catch these victims? How am I going to get them under control? And then how am I going to kill them so the police aren't onto me? And it's just chilling. And when you look at these videos with him talking, it's so calm, it's so methodical.
Yeah. It reminds me of this book that I read called Evil, and it talks about the different kind of levels of killers and killings. You know, there can be crimes of passion, there can be kind of accidental killing, things that involve different emotions, but this is, I would say in this book, they would also say that when someone plots to this level and just goes out on the attack, that's another level of evil. And I think you can see that in how he describes what, you know, leading up to these killings.
Yeah, and in the next clip we're actually going to see, it's Scott Moulton and Denise Tykowski. Again, a couple that was sitting in their car. They were beside an apartment building, and it was actually Anthony's sisters lived in this apartment building in Oregon, and he was just there visiting them. He's out having a cigarette, you know, and he sees a couple sitting in a car. So where
he wasn't even out looking for it necessarily.
He wasn't out looking for it, but where does his mind immediately go? It's like, oh, there's a couple. You know, I've got the gun in the wheel of my pickup truck where I would keep it so I can go get it. They're isolated. I can go attack them. Right in the middle of a parking lot at this apartment building. And so again, we're going to see that he approaches them, and he's going to talk about what he does.
Whoever was at the window was hesitant and I think it was the dude, I'm not sure. sure, but whoever was hesitant to let down the window because I had to hit on the window with the butt of the gun to, like I was gonna break it because they didn't seem to want to give immediate access, like the one that's gonna protect me, or but when they let down the window, then I unlocked, showed the gun, and then unlocked the door and got in. And the immediate thing is to occupy the strongest victim, in this case, male.
And so they were subsequently found in Denise's trunk, shot to death.
Yeah, in the same apartment parking lot. I mean, someone had just seen it sitting there for a couple of days, and then they went and looked, and they found them in the trunk. But when you listen to that, how chilling it is. I mean, he talked about Scott was sitting in the passenger seat, knocked on the door, and he found it amusing that Scott wouldn't roll down the window because he's like, he's thinking that the window is going to protect him. And so, I mean, he was just telling these stories like, I mean, it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around it, how he just found certain things comical about how some of the things played out.
And in reality, no person would roll down the window, but it's almost like he got off on terrorizing these people. Yeah,
absolutely. And when, I think Frank Stiles, who is the lead detective in this, and he's in the room, Tom Ross, who is still around and works for the prosecutor's office at this point, he was also one of the main detectives on this case. He's doing most of the questioning of Anthony in this, but Frank, told me that you could almost see the excitement in Anthony in explaining. He thought he was so clever, the way he could sneak up on people and the way he could trick them into letting him into the car and how he would use different weapons. And he even said that, well, when I would bind them to get them under control, I would then unbind them after I killed them because I didn't want the police to think they were bound. So I'm always trying to think how I can get
and in the rape
it.
cases, he'd have the women redressed to try to hide the fact that they were raped. Well, he wasn't that clever. He certainly did get away with a lot for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to Connie Sue Thompson. She's another just female victim who was out on her own.
Yeah, and she's actually one that was done with his brother, Nathaniel. Again, there's, Tommy Gordon, Connie Sue Thompson, and Dawn Backus, who were killed with Nathaniel and Anthony. And again, this is just a crime of opportunity because they saw her walking down the street. She had reportedly a fight with her boyfriend. She had a cut on her hand, and she was trying to get to the hospital. And, Anthony and Nathaniel, they spot her. They stop and offer to give her a ride to the hospital.
She was hitchhiking or just walking in the street and would stop after where she's going or something. Like, we didn't have to force her into the truck. I know that.
Okay.
So, like, I don't know if she was hitchhiking or she was just walking and, like, where you going in all the snow?
All right.
Type thing, and she had got a hand cut from, I don't know, she didn't say from boyfriend or a fight or something, but, and she was going to the hospital. She had some kind of cut on that, I don't know, hand, arm, but it wasn't bleeding profusely or nothing like that.
She was going for treatment.
Yeah.
And so Connie Sue was then found in a culvert by some little girls who were out playing.
Right. Yeah, and again, I mean, they picked her up. She was just walking down. She willingly got into the car because I guess it was just a different era back then. I mean, you know, people would give people a ride, whatever. So maybe she didn't think anything of it at the time, but you just think of the terror, you know, because they weren't far from the hospital, and they headed toward the hospital initially, but then he's like, well, then we headed out into the country.
And that's when she realizes we're not going to the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, she's sitting in the middle with, you know, Anthony driving, her in the middle, and Nathaniel on the other side.
Dawn Backus is kind of the outlier with all these victims because she was a little girl. She was 12 years old at the time. And Anthony's story has been that he didn't realize that she was so young. He thought that she was a college student when he saw her walking down Bancroft Street.
Which is just ridiculous, and I mean, he repeats that over and over in the interviews with police, that, you know, because he saw her walking on Bancroft, she walked past the university and then turned down a side street. But interestingly, whenever Nathaniel, because again, he was involved in this killing also, whenever they talked to him, they said, how old was this girl? And he's like, well, she was a young teenager. And which, I mean, she was 12, so she wasn't quite a teenager, but I mean, that's a little bit easier to believe that they believe she was a very young teenager versus what Anthony was saying, that she was a college student. She clearly wasn't. I mean, she was a very small girl, very thin. You know, I mean, maybe she looked a little older than 12, but.
Yeah, and this one was really hard because she had just left a fun evening out, as you did back then with your friends at the arcade or place where the kids gathered, and her parents were expecting her to give them a call as soon as she got home, and that call didn't come. So let's listen to what he says about pinpointing and targeting Dawn Backus.
You know, I just know she just kept walking straight down Bancroft, and then she turned to the right, and it was a long street.
Side street?
Right.
Okay.
And when she turned the side street, I took the next street and speeded up and parked, and then.
So you're in a street parallel with her,
Parallel,
speeding up past her?
Right.
Okay.
To the corner.
All right.
Then I parked. I get out. I might have jimmied the door,
What would the purpose of jimmying the door be?
so they would hit it and it wouldn't open. I mean,
You do that from the inside? What do you use?
no, you just move the panel and take the latch pin up out of the hinge. So when you pull it, it's not pulling anything.
Okay.
It's free flow.
All right.
Then the only way you can open it is from the outside,
All right.
or roll down the window and reach out and open it.
So here, he's talking about having just taken Dawn Backus off the street. He wants to make sure that she can't get out of the car while he drives to go get Nathaniel, his brother, and then they take her to the State Theater, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple really disturbing things about this, yes. So he knows, he actually goes on a street parallel to where she's walking, speeds up, and then cuts down a street that intersects with where she's walking, and he knows, you know, she's coming this way. And when the truck is parked, yeah, he jimmies the door because he's like, well, I'm gonna have to put her in the front. I'm by myself. I'm not gonna be able to control her. So I'm gonna jimmy the door so she can't get out. And so what does happen when he does take her off the street, he puts her in front of the passenger seat on the floor, you know, covers her up with a blanket, and then he goes and gets Nathaniel. I mean, this, of all the killings, I mean, this is certainly the worst. And what I think this shows is that he saw her walking. He quickly devised a plan. Okay, I've got to go down to this street, then I've got to be able to cut her off, and then I've got to be able to figure out a way to keep her controlled in the car. And all that happens quickly, but it's that mindset that I want people to really understand.
I think going back to the whole discussion over her age and how old she was, I think that it points to the fact that he knew the difference between right and wrong. In no world is it right to kidnap anybody off the street and kill them, but he knew, and you could see him process in his mind, at least in what you've told us about the description of the age, that she was not the adult age. And he kind of tinkers around with that and justifies it to himself, that he's got to lie and cover it up. He knew.
And yeah, absolutely. And what's really crazy about this is that he did all this by himself. He could have then taken her to the state theater and killed him by himself. But no, he takes this terrified little girl back to an apartment where his brother is, talks to somebody, hey, where's Nathaniel? Oh, he's upstairs, yells for Nathaniel to come down. And this, I mean, why? Why? Why are you going to get your brother and say, hey, I've got this young girl in my car?
And then for the brother to get into that headspace of, oh, I'm just hanging out at this apartment and now I'm going to go torture this little girl. I mean, just like that.
And Mel, think about this. This is why people are angry about this case. And again, there's nothing the prosecution could do. They had to make this deal so they learn all these details about all these killings. I mean, I don't blame Julia Bates. She did what she had to do. She was looking out for the victims, these families that didn't know answers, but they let Nathaniel out after 20 years. This is a serial killer who is doing this, and he is now living in Toledo.
And not too far from a school. That's true.
Not too far.
Let's talk about Sandra Pogorski and Tommy Gordon. Sandra survived this.
Yeah, Sandra actually did. And this was after the Vicky Small back in 1973. This was actually the first killing that Anthony and Nathaniel did. This was in May of 1980. And when you listen to this clip, this is really terrifying because it is clear that they were looking for a victim. They were looking for a victim. So yes, Sandra ends up surviving this. Tommy Gordon gets shot and killed. Sandra, Anthony stabbed many times with an awl, which is sort of like an ice pick type thing. And he believed that she was dead, but she pretended to be dead. And she ended up living, and she was a key factor in getting them convicted much later. But listen to this clip, and then I want to talk about it.
Earlier that night, we had followed one place. Then, it was this white car, and it got stopped at the railroad track, and the railroad was like, from now on, and we started to take those victims, but I think changed my mind. Then we went somewhere else. I don't know what part of town or whatever. I just know just driving as far as Pogorski.
What were they doing when you saw them?
Just sitting in the car.
Okay.
So you listen to that, they were looking for a victim that night. I mean, the brothers sitting in the car, they were out driving the streets, and they say, we followed this car for a while, we get up to a railroad tracks, and we're having this conversation. Well, can we jump them? Can we control them? And they weren't looking to rob them. They were looking to assault and kill a couple. And they're behind them.
So those people in the white car avoided
Unbelievable. And
the Cook brothers that night.
Obviously, we don't know who those people are, but I can only imagine if they were to see this, or they see the story, and they knew that they were those people, it'd be terrifying. But then when Anthony's like, well, no, I decided we couldn't pull that off, so let's keep looking. And they kept driving the street, and again, they see a couple sitting in their car. And they were sitting in a car in front of Sandra's house.
Which you could argue is way more bold than some couple in the middle of nowhere near some train tracks.
Yeah, and they go up. Nathaniel goes up to the passenger side, breaks the window with the butt of his rifle that he's there. They get in the car, they control them, and then they're off. I mean, this all happened on Utica Street in front of Sandra's house. They were looking for a couple to kill, and they found them.
And you said this was the first couple?
This was the first one they did back in May of 1980.
So yeah, I try to think back to them. I mean, if it had been happening repeatedly, which it eventually did, you would not sit in a car anywhere if the
Right.
serial killer's running around, but this was the first couple.
Yeah, right. But as we just showed you all those clips, there's at least 3 where couples are
Yeah.
just sitting in cars and they go up and control them at that point. I mean, I can't even get in that headspace to even understand how they do that. But it was their MO. They took great pride in it. And what's interesting about Nathaniel, we actually have his interview also, and we're not showing that.
Mm-hmm.
But they asked him, did you think about this? And he would just be like, no. You know what? Once it happened, it was over. I didn't want to think about it. Not Anthony. I mean, he wanted to think about it, and he was very casual. Almost thought that he wanted to show how smart he was by telling these stories to the police. And again, this is a guy, December 5th, the parole board's gonna hear his story, and some people think he could get out, others say that's crazy, but
I'm one of those, but we'll see. Crazier things have happened.
Right.
You have a bunch of content for us on WTOL 11+, the 2 original stories plus that you did in 2020, and then another story that you did here leading up to this parole hearing. So you guys can check all of that out on WTOL 11+. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of 11 Investigates. I'm Melissa Andrews, along with Brian Duggar.